The warm rays of the morning sun spread over the tranquil fields of Greystone Valley, illuminating a picturesque farm nestled in its heart. This farm, owned by a humble farmer named Eli Turner, had seen better days. Passed down for generations, the land was once a symbol of prosperity. Now, it barely supported Ellis' modest life. With debts piling up and crops failing, Eli found himself at the brink of despair. For years, Eli had struggled to keep the farm afloat, relying on his small flock of chickens and a few rows of crops to make ends meet. His once vibrant fields were now overgrown with weeds, and the weight of his family's legacy bore heavily on his shoulders. His wife had passed away years earlier, and the only solace he found was in the simple routine of tending to his land. One chilly spring morning, as Eli began his usual rounds of checking on his chickens, something caught his eye near the far end of the field. A faint glimmer reflected from the dew-covered grass. Intrigued, he walked closer, his boots sinking slightly into the soft earth. What he found left him frozen in place. Lying in a small depression in the field was an egg, an enormous egg, easily 3 times the size of any chicken egg had ever seen. Its shell was a pale, pearlescent white, with subtle swirling patterns that seemed almost otherworldly. For a moment, Eli wondered if it was some kind of elaborate prank. But as he knelt down and touched the egg, the warmth emanating from it convinced him otherwise. "What kind of bird lays an egg like this?" he murmured, his calloused fingers gently brushing the surface. His first instinct was caution. Could it belong to a wild predator? Was it safe to move? But his curiosity soon got the better of him. With care, Eli carried the egg back to the farmhouse and placed it in a makeshift nest lined with straw. He didn't know what kind of creature lay inside, but deep down, he sensed that this discovery might be the sign he had been waiting for, a chance to turn his life around. Little did he know, the arrival of the egg would set off a chain of events that would change his life forever. The massive egg became the centerpiece of Eli Turner's modest home. Nestled in a corner of the kitchen, surrounded by straw, it radiated a gentle warmth that seemed almost alive. Eli couldn't shake the feeling that this egg was extraordinary, though it left him grappling with more questions than answers. He began his days like clockwork, checking on the egg, adjusting the warmth with an old heat lamp he'd dug out of his barn, and muttering to himself about the possibilities. Could it be an ostrich? That didn't make sense. Ostriches weren't native to the area, and had never seen one in Greystone Valley. Could it be a prank by some of the local kids? But how would they even manage to place such an egg without him noticing? His curiosity quickly turned into obsession. At the local feed store, he asked old-timers and fellow farmers about the egg, hoping someone could provide an explanation. "Never heard of anything like it," one elderly man said, shaking his head. "If you're lucky, it's worth something. If you're unlucky, well, I'd keep a rifle nearby, just in case." Eli chuckled nervously, but the words stayed with him. What kind of creature could come from an egg so large? Was he putting himself in danger by keeping it? Despite the warnings, he couldn't bring himself to discard it. Something about the egg felt important. One evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, Eli heard the crunch of tires on gravel. He glanced out the window to see an unfamiliar truck pulling into his driveway. A tall man in a weathered jacket stepped out, his boots thudding against the ground as he approached the farmhouse. "Eli Turner?" the man asked, his voice deep and serious. "I am Dr. Ian Caldwell, a biologist. Heard through the grapevine you found something unusual." Eli hesitated but finally nodded. Word traveled fast in a small town, and he figured it was only a matter of time before someone came poking around. He led the man into the house, where Dr. Caldwell's eyes immediately locked onto the egg. "My God," the biologist whispered, crouching down to inspect it. "Do you have any idea what this could be?" "No," Eli admitted. "I was hoping you'd tell me." Dr. Caldwell pulled out a small device, scanning the egg's surface. "The heat it's generating. This isn't normal. And these markings, look at them closely. They resemble patterns found in fossils from millions of years ago." Eli frowned. "Fossils? What are you saying?" Dr. Caldwell hesitated, his expression unreadable. "I am not saying anything for sure. But if this egg is what I think it might be, well, you might have something that's been extinct for a very, very long time." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Eli felt a mix of disbelief and excitement. Extinct? Could this be the miracle he'd been praying for? Over the following weeks, Eli found himself growing more attached to the mysterious egg. He spent hours sitting by its side, talking to it as if it could hear him. Dr. Caldwell came and went, running tests and taking notes, but the biologist offered no definitive answers. One morning, as Eli adjusted the heat lamp, he noticed something unusual, a faint vibration. Startled, he leaned in closer. The egg shifted slightly, a soft tapping sound emanating from within. His heart raced. "It's happening," Dr. Caldwell said when Eli called him. "The hatching process has started." Eli could hardly contain his anticipation. He sat by the egg day and night, barely sleeping, as the faint tapping grew louder. Finally, late one night, the shell began to crack. With a sound like breaking glass, the egg split open, and Ellis' breath caught in his throat. A creature unlike anything had ever seen emerged, its tiny body slick and glistening. It had large, intelligent eyes that blinked up at him, a soft covering of downy feathers, and claws that looked both delicate and powerful. Dr. Caldwell, who had rushed over as soon as the egg started to hatch, stared in awe. This isn't possible." "What is it?" Eli asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Caldwell knelt down, his eyes wide with amazement. "It looks like a species of dinosaur. A theropod, maybe. But it's small, like a bird. I've never seen anything like it." Eli couldn't believe what he was hearing. A dinosaur? In his kitchen? The hatchling let out a soft chirp, its tiny claws grasping at the air. Without thinking, Eli reached out his hand, and the creature nuzzled against his palm, its warmth seeping into his skin. "It's bonded with you," Dr. Caldwell said. "You're the first thing it saw when it hatched. As far as it's concerned, you're its parent." Ellis' heart swelled with a mixture of pride and responsibility. He cradled the tiny creature in his hands, marveling at its fragility and strength. In that moment, he knew his life would never be the same. The next morning, as sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, the hatchling began to explore its surroundings. It waddled clumsily on its tiny legs, chirping curiously as it inspected everything from Ellis' boots to the edge of the table. Its feathery down shimmered in the light, and Eli couldn't help but smile at its innocent curiosity. Dr. Caldwell returned later that afternoon, carrying several cases of equipment. "Eli," he began, his tone serious, "we need to talk. I've sent some preliminary data to a few trusted colleagues, and their responses have been alarming." Eli furrowed his brow, glancing at the hatchling, which was now perched precariously on a chair, pecking at the leg of the table. "Alarming how?" Dr. Caldwell set his equipment down and pulled out a tablet, showing Eli a series of charts and images. "Based on the structure of the egg and some genetic material I've managed to analyze, this creature, whatever it is, has traits that match extinct theropod dinosaurs. But here's the twist, it's not purely prehistoric." "What do you mean?" Eli asked, feeling a chill creep up his spine. Dr. Caldwell hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "There's evidence of genetic manipulation. Someone, or something, engineered this creature. It's not just a dinosaur, it's a hybrid." The words hit Eli like a hammer. "Engineered? You're saying someone created this thing? Why?" "I don't know," Caldwell admitted. "But it explains why the egg ended up here, on your farm. Whoever created it might have been testing it, or worse, trying to hide it. And now that it's hatched, they might come looking for it." Ellis' protective instincts kicked in immediately. He looked over at the hatchling, now chirping happily as it tried to climb onto the counter. "Nobody's taking this little guy away. He's staying here, with me." Dr. Caldwell nodded, though his expression remained grim. "I understand how you feel, Eli, but this is bigger than both of us. If someone engineered this creature, they could pose a danger, not just to it, but to us, too." Over the next few days, the hatchling's behavior grew increasingly strange. While it was mostly playful and affectionate, there were moments when its instincts seemed to take over. One afternoon, Eli found it staring out the window, its tiny body rigid and its feathers bristling. It let out a low, guttural growl, an entirely new sound that sent shivers down Ellis' spine. "What's gotten into you, little guy?" he asked, approaching cautiously. The hatchling relaxed as soon as Eli placed a hand on its back, but the moment stuck with him. Was the creature sensing something he couldn't? That night, as Eli prepared for bed, he heard rustling outside. Grabbing a flashlight, he stepped onto the porch and scanned the dark fields. At first, he saw nothing but swaying grass, but then he spotted it, a shadowy figure moving near the edge of his property. "Hey!" Eli shouted, his voice cutting through the night. The figure froze for a moment before darting out of sight. Ellis' heart raced as he hurried back inside, locking the doors and checking on the hatchling, which was now curled up in a makeshift nest in the living room. "What's going on here?" he muttered, his mind racing with possibilities. The next morning, Dr. Caldwell arrived with news. "Eli, I think we've got a lead. I cross-referenced some of the genetic markers from the hatchling with data from a private database. It looks like the DNA was spliced using technology that's not available to the general public. Whoever did this had resources, serious resources." Eli frowned. "You're saying this isn't just some rogue scientist messing around? This is big?" "Very big," Caldwell confirmed. "And I think that shadow you saw last night might have been someone looking for the egg or the creature." The two men decided to set up cameras around the farm to monitor for any unusual activity. Meanwhile, the hatchling continued to grow at an astonishing rate. Within just a week, it had doubled in size, its feathers darkening and taking on an iridescent sheen. Its claws grew sharper, and its movements became more precise, almost calculated. Despite the rapid growth, the bond between Eli and the hatchling deepened. The creature followed him everywhere, chirping happily whenever Eli spoke to it. It even started responding to its name, Talon, a moniker Eli had chosen after watching it skillfully catch a moth in midair. "Talon," Eli said one evening as they sat on the porch together, the creature nestled at his side. "I don't know where you came from, but you're part of this family now. I'll protect you. No matter what." Just as Eli began to feel a sense of normalcy returning, a black SUV pulled into his driveway one afternoon. Two men in suits stepped out, their expressions cold and professional. Ellis' stomach dropped as they approached the house. "Mr. Turner," one of them said, flashing a badge. "We're with the Department of Wildlife and Environmental Affairs. We've received reports of an unusual animal on your property. Mind if we take a look?" Ellis' mind raced. He knew these men weren't who they claimed to be. Their polished shoes and crisp suits screamed government, or worse, private contractors hired by whoever created Talon. "I am sorry," Eli said, forcing a casual tone. "I don't know what you're talking about. Just regular chickens and cows here." The men exchanged a glance before the other one spoke. "We'd still like to take a look around. For public safety." Eli stood his ground. "You're going to need a warrant for that." The men hesitated, their polite facade slipping for just a moment. "We'll be back," one of them said before turning to leave. As the SUV disappeared down the road, Ellis' heart pounded in his chest. He knew this was only the beginning. Whoever those men were, they weren't going to stop until they found what they were looking for. Eli knew he couldn't afford to wait for the men to return. Their polished professionalism had unnerved him, and he felt the urgency to protect Talon. He paced the living room, glancing at the hatchling, now growing faster than Head ever thought possible. Talon was no longer the fragile creature Head found. Its sharp claws clicked softly on the hardwood floor, and its watchful eyes followed Ellis' every move. "They'll come back," Eli muttered to himself. "And next time, they won't be asking nicely." Dr. Caldwell arrived later that evening, his expression grim as Eli recounted the visit. "This confirms our suspicions," Caldwell said, rubbing his temple. "These men aren't from any legitimate wildlife agency. They're likely connected to whoever created Talon." "Then what do we do?" Eli asked, his voice tinged with desperation. "I can't let them take him." He's family now. Caldwell nodded, understanding the emotional bond that had formed between Eli and the creature. We need to keep him hidden. But more importantly, we need to find out who's behind this. The only way to protect Talon is to expose the truth. Over the next few days, Eli and Caldwell worked tirelessly to safeguard the farm. They installed more cameras and reinforced the barn, converting it into a secure space for Talon to roam freely. Caldwell also reached out to trusted colleagues, hoping to uncover any leads on the genetic engineering involved in Talon's creation. Meanwhile, Talon's growth showed no signs of slowing. The once tiny hatchling now stood as tall as Ellis' knee, its feathers gleaming with an almost otherworldly sheen. Its movements were graceful yet powerful, and it seemed to understand Ellis' words more than Head thought possible. Talon, Eli said one afternoon, crouching to meet the creature's gaze, you've got to stay out of sight, okay? Those men, they're dangerous. The creature tilted its head, letting out a low chirp that sounded almost like acknowledgement. Eli couldn't help but smile, despite the tension. Good boy. One evening, Caldwell burst into the farmhouse, holding a stack of papers and his tablet. Eli, I found something, he said, his voice a mix of excitement and concern. He spread the documents across the kitchen table, pointing to a series of diagrams and coded entries. There's a biotech company, Genora Labs, that's been quietly experimenting with hybrid animals. They've been using remote locations for their projects, often abandoning them when they're done. It's possible that Talon's egg was part of one of their experiments. Eli leaned over the table, scanning the papers. So they just leave these creatures behind? Like garbage? Caldwell sighed. It's worse than that. If an experiment is deemed a failure, or too risky, they dispose of it. Talon might have been a test subject that escaped or was deliberately hidden. Ellis' fists clenched. And now they want him back. Not happening. Caldwell placed a hand on Ellis' shoulder. We'll fight this, but we need more proof. If we can expose what they've been doing, they won't just come after Talon, they'll have to answer to the public. The peaceful evenings on the farm became rare as Eli and Caldwell remained on high alert. The cameras occasionally picked up movement near the perimeter, but nothing definitive. Still, Eli couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. One night, as Eli sat on the porch, Talon suddenly bolted upright, its feathers bristling. A low growl rumbled from its throat, unlike any sound Eli had heard before. What is it, boy? Eli whispered, standing to follow Talon's gaze. The creature's sharp eyes were fixed on the tree line at the edge of the property. Moments later, a faint glimmer of light appeared, a flashlight. Ellis' heart pounded as he realized someone was trespassing. Grabbing his shotgun, he motioned for Talon to stay put and crept toward the source of the light. As he approached, he heard hushed voices. We can't leave without it, one voice said, frustration evident. The boss wants results. Ellis' grip tightened on the shotgun. Who's there? He barked, stepping out of the shadows. The intruders froze, their flashlights illuminating their startled faces. They wore dark uniforms, unmarked but clearly professional. One of them raised his hands, a forced smile on his face. Easy there, farmer. We're just surveying the area. Get off my land, Eli growled, aiming the shotgun squarely at the Mon's chest. Now. The men hesitated, glancing at each other before retreating. We'll be back, one of them muttered as they disappeared into the darkness. Eli stood there for a long moment, his hands shaking as adrenaline coursed through him. When he finally returned to the house, Talon was waiting by the door, its sharp eyes filled with an uncanny understanding. They're not giving up, Eli said softly, running a hand through his hair. But neither am I. Despite the danger, the bond between Eli and Talon deepened. The creature seemed to sense Ellis' emotions, offering comfort in its own way. It would nuzzle against him when he was stressed and follow him loyally around the farm, never straying far. One afternoon, as Eli repaired a fence on the far side of the property, Talon suddenly darted ahead, its keen senses picking up on something. Eli watched as it stopped near a patch of dirt, scratching at the ground. "What have you found now?" Eli muttered, walking over. To his surprise, Talon unearthed a strange metallic device, a small, camouflaged camera. "They're spying on us," Eli realized, his anger boiling over. He crushed the device under his boot, determined to send a message. As the days passed, the tension grew. Eli and Caldwell knew the intruders would return, likely with more force. They worked tirelessly to strengthen their defenses and gather evidence against Genora Labs. Meanwhile, Talon continued to grow, its once clumsy movements now replaced with the grace and power of a predator. But even in the midst of the chaos, there were moments of peace. Eli would sit on the porch with Talon by his side, watching the sunset and wondering what the future held. No matter what came next, he was determined to protect the creature that had become his family. The discovery of the hidden camera deepened Ellis' resolve, but it also complicated matters. Whoever was watching them wasn't just trespassing, they were collecting information, likely for a more coordinated effort. Caldwell suggested taking the camera to a trusted contact in town, someone who could trace its origin and uncover who was behind the surveillance. Eli hesitated at first. The fewer people who knew about Talon, the safer they'd be. But Caldwell was insistent. "We need allies, Eli. If this goes public, Genora Labs, or whoever they are, will be forced to back off." Reluctantly, Eli agreed. The next morning, Caldwell drove into town, leaving Eli alone on the farm with Talon. It was a quiet day, the kind that made the looming threat seem almost like a bad dream. Eli spent the morning tending to his crops, his ever-growing companion close at hand. Talon had become his shadow, always watching, always alert. That evening, as Eli prepared dinner, there was a knock at the door. He froze, his mind flashing back to the trespassers. Grabbing his shotgun, he approached cautiously and peeked through the window. To his surprise, it wasn't one of the men from before. It was a young woman in her mid-20s, dressed in casual but professional clothing. Eli opened the door a crack, keeping the shotgun visible. "Who are you, and what do you want?" The woman raised her hands in a gesture of peace. "My name is Dr. Vanessa Mercer. I work with a conservation group. Please, I am not here to harm you. I need to warn you." Eli studied her for a moment, then reluctantly let her in. Once inside, Vanessa glanced around nervously, as if expecting someone to burst in at any moment. "You're in danger," she began, her voice low. "The people after that creature, they won't stop. They don't care about laws or ethics. They only care about their experiments. How do you know about Talon?" Eli demanded, his grip tightening on the shotgun. Vanessa hesitated, then sighed. "Because I used to work for them, Genora Labs. I left when I saw what they were doing. Talon he's not like anything else. He's part of a project they've been hiding for years. They'll do anything to get him back." Vanessa explained that Genora Labs had been experimenting with advanced genetic engineering, blending DNA from different species to create hybrid animals with enhanced traits. Talon, she revealed, was one of their most ambitious creations, a hybrid between a bird of prey and a prehistoric reptile, designed to be both resilient and highly intelligent. "They were supposed to destroy the eggs," Vanessa said, her voice heavy with guilt. "But someone smuggled them out. I think one of the scientists couldn't bring themselves to let them be destroyed. That's probably how Talon ended up here." Ellis' mind raced. The creature he had come to love wasn't just rare, it was one of a kind. "Why are you helping me?" he asked, his suspicion evident. "Because what they're doing is wrong," Vanessa replied firmly. "Talon deserves to live free, not be locked in a lab. And because..." She hesitated, her gaze dropping. "Because I owe it to him. I helped create him." Vanessa's arrival brought both clarity and complications. She offered to help Eli protect Talon, but it wouldn't be easy. Genora Labs had resources far beyond their own, and it was only a matter of time before they returned. "We need evidence," Vanessa said. If we can expose what they're doing, they won't be able to come after you without risking public backlash. Caldwell returned later that evening, his face grim. The camera head taken into town had been traced back to a distributor commonly used by corporate security firms. It's definitely connected to Genora, he confirmed. The three of them sat around the kitchen table, forming a plan. Vanessa suggested reaching out to a journalist she trusted, someone who had previously exposed corporate wrongdoing. Caldwell would continue researching Genora's operations, while Eli would focus on keeping Talon hidden and safe. As the days passed, Talon continued to grow, both in size and intelligence. He had started mimicking some of Ellis' behaviors, such as opening doors and fetching tools from the barn. His keen senses also made him an excellent watchdog, often alerting Eli to any unusual activity on the property. One evening, Eli took Talon for a walk along the edge of the field, hoping to clear his mind. The creature stayed close, its sharp eyes scanning the horizon. As they walked, Eli couldn't help but marvel at how far Talon had come. What had started as a fragile, unhatched egg had become a magnificent, almost mythical creature. "You're not just a pet," Eli said softly, stroking Talon's iridescent feathers. "You're family." Their newfound sense of purpose was shattered one night when the farm came under attack. Eli was woken by Talon's piercing screech, followed by the sound of breaking glass. Grabbing his shotgun, he raced downstairs to find two masked intruders in the living room. "Stay back!" Eli shouted, aiming the weapon at them. One of the men lunged forward, but before Eli could react, Talon swooped down from the staircase, his talons outstretched. The creature let out a deafening cry as it tackled the intruder, knocking him to the ground. The second man hesitated, clearly unnerved by the sight of the fierce hybrid. Eli took advantage of the moment, firing a warning shot into the ceiling. "Get out!" he roared. The men fled, leaving behind a trail of broken glass and overturned furniture. Eli stood in the wreckage, his heart pounding. Talon landed beside him, his feathers ruffled but otherwise unharmed. "You saved me, boy," Eli said, his voice shaking with a mix of fear and gratitude. "We're in this together." The attack left Eli shaken, but it also solidified his resolve. Talon wasn't just a creature to protect. He was now a vital part of Ellis' life, a partner, a guardian, and a beacon of hope. However, the incident raised new questions about the lengths Genora Labs would go to recapture Talon. Vanessa, Caldwell, and Eli regrouped the following morning, their nerves frayed but their determination stronger than ever. Eli noticed that Talon's presence had begun to transform the farm in unexpected ways. The hybrid creature wasn't just protective, he was also startlingly intuitive. Talon started helping with chores in his own unique way, dragging tools across the field with his powerful claws, chasing off pests that threatened the crops, and even guiding stray livestock back into the pens. His intelligence was undeniable, and Eli marveled at how seamlessly Talon adapted to farm life. Caldwell watched in awe one afternoon as Talon herded a group of sheep that had wandered too far. "I've never seen anything like it," he remarked. "It's like he understands what you're saying." "He does," Eli replied with a proud smile. "He's not just any animal. He's different." Vanessa nodded, her expression somber. "That's exactly why they'll stop at nothing to get him back. Talon represents everything Genora wants: control, power, profit. But here, he's free. We have to keep it that way." Later that evening, as Vanessa helped Eli board up the broken windows from the attack, she shared more about her involvement with Genora Labs. "I didn't always agree with their methods," she admitted. "But I stayed because I thought I could make a difference from the inside. When I saw what they were doing to creatures like Talon, I couldn't stay any longer." Eli paused, leaning on his hammer. "You're risking a lot by helping us." "Why?" Vanessa hesitated before answering. "Because I believe Talon is more than just an experiment. He's proof that humanity can create something extraordinary without destroying it. If we can protect him, maybe we can show the world there's a better way." Ellis' gaze softened. "He's family now. I don't care what they want. Talon's not going anywhere. Despite their united front, the weight of the situation bore down on Eli. The farm was his livelihood, but it was also becoming a battlefield. He feared for Talon's safety, but even more, he feared losing the creature who had brought so much purpose back into his life. The next morning, Eli decided to test just how much Talon understood. He took the creature out to the farthest field, where the wheat stretched tall and golden under the morning sun. Eli held up a stick and tossed it into the distance. Go on, boy. Fetch. Talon tilted his head, his bright eyes flicking between Eli and the stick. After a moment, he bounded forward, his powerful legs carrying him swiftly across the field. He returned moments later, the stick clenched carefully in his beak. Eli laughed, clapping his hands. Good boy. You're full of surprises, aren't you? Talon chirped softly, leaning his head against Ella's shoulder in a gesture of affection. For a moment, all of Ella's fears melted away. This wasn't just a creature created in a lab. It was a living, breathing being with emotions, instincts, and a capacity for connection that rivaled any human's. As much as Eli cherished his bond with Talon, the secrecy surrounding him began to take a toll. He couldn't risk letting anyone else on the farm, not even his closest neighbors. Questions about his sudden reclusiveness started to circulate, and Eli found himself dodging phone calls and avoiding town altogether. One afternoon, Caldwell confronted him. You can't keep hiding forever, Eli. People are going to start asking questions. I am doing what I have to do, Eli shot back. If they find out about Talon, it's over. Caldwell sighed. I get it, but isolating yourself isn't the answer. You need allies, people you can trust. Vanessa chimed in. He's right. If we're going to stand up to Jinora, we need more than just the three of us. We need to show the world what Talon represents before they can twist the narrative. Eli considered their words but remained conflicted. Trusting others meant risking Talon's safety. Could he take that chance? That night, as the trio gathered around the kitchen table to strategize, Talon let out a low growl from his spot near the back door. His feathers ruffled, and his piercing eyes fixed on the darkness outside. What is it, boy? Eli asked, rising cautiously. Vanessa grabbed a flashlight, and the three of them stepped onto the porch. The beam of light cut through the night, revealing tire tracks leading up to the barn. Someone had been there. They're watching us, Caldwell muttered, his jaw tightening. Eli clenched his fists. Let them. If they want to fight, well, give them one. Vanessa placed a hand on his shoulder. We need to be smart about this, Eli. Talon's survival depends on it. The intrusion marked a turning point for Eli. He realized that keeping Talon a secret wasn't just about protecting the creature. It was about standing up against a system that sought to exploit and destroy for profit. Talon's existence was a symbol of resilience, a reminder that life was meant to be free. As the night stretched on, Eli, Vanessa, and Caldwell solidified their plan. They would gather evidence of Jinora's illegal activities and reach out to trusted allies who could help expose the truth. It was a risky move, but it was the only way to ensure Talon's future. In the shadows, Talon watched them, his bright eyes filled with understanding. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The morning after discovering the tire tracks, Eli woke with a gnawing sense of unease. Talon's instincts had proven right before, and now, the evidence of surveillance made it clear, Jinora Labs was closing in. Vanessa and Caldwell joined him at the breakfast table, their expressions mirroring his concern. Vanessa, sipping her coffee, spoke first. I've been thinking. If they've already found the farm, it's only a matter of time before they make their move. Eli nodded grimly. We can't wait for them to strike. We need to be proactive. But before they could solidify their plan, the sound of a vehicle approaching the property interrupted them. Eli glanced at Vanessa and Caldwell, his face hardening. Stay here. I'll handle this. As Eli stepped out onto the porch, a sleek black SUV came into view, kicking up dust as it rolled to a stop. The driver's door opened, and a man in a sharp suit emerged. His demeanor was polished but cold, his eyes scanning the property with calculated precision. "Mr. Turner, I presume?" the man called out, his voice carrying a hint of menace. "I am Mr. Kane, representing Genora Labs. I believe you're in possession of something that belongs to us." Ellis' jaw tightened, but he kept his composure. "I don't know what you're talking about." Kane's lips curled into a faint smile. "Let's not play games, Mr. Turner. We know about the egg, and we know what's hatched from it. Hand it over, and we can avoid any unpleasantness." Eli took a step forward, his stance firm. "You're trespassing. Get off my land." Kane's smile vanished, replaced by a steely glare. "Have it your way. But know this, you can't protect it forever. Genora always gets what it wants." With that, Kane returned to the SUV and drove off, leaving a cloud of dust and a chilling promise in his wake. Shaken but resolute, Eli returned to the house and relayed the encounter to Vanessa and Caldwell. "They're not going to stop," he said. "We need help." Vanessa nodded. "It's time to involve the community. If we can show them what's really going on, we might stand a chance." Reluctantly, Eli agreed. That evening, he and Caldwell visited a few trusted neighbors, carefully explaining the situation without revealing too much about Talon. They spoke of Genora's unethical practices and their attempts to exploit rural communities for profit. To their surprise, the neighbors were more supportive than Eli had anticipated. Many of them had their own grievances with large corporations encroaching on their livelihoods. "If you need us, we'll stand with you," one of them said firmly. "No company has the right to take what's yours." Back at the farm, Vanessa noticed Talon acting strangely. He was pacing near the barn, his sharp eyes fixed on the horizon. Curious, she followed him outside, where he stopped and stared intently at a patch of ground. "What is it, boy?" Vanessa asked, crouching beside him. Talon began to dig, his powerful claws tearing into the dirt with surprising precision. Within minutes, he uncovered a small, metallic device, an electronic tracker. Vanessa's heart sank. Genora had planted it during their previous visit. She rushed back to the house, holding the device aloft. "They've been tracking him," she exclaimed. Eli took the tracker and smashed it under his boot. "We have to act fast," he said. "If they know where he is, they'll come back." Vanessa had an idea. "We can use this against them. Let's move Talon to a safe location and leave the tracker in a decoy spot. It'll buy us some time." That night, under the cover of darkness, the trio executed their plan. Caldwell drove out to a remote area, leaving the shattered tracker in an abandoned barn. Meanwhile, Eli and Vanessa led Talon to a heavily wooded section of the property, far from the house. They set up a makeshift shelter, ensuring he'd be safe and hidden. As they worked, Talon seemed to sense the gravity of the situation. He stayed close to Eli, his bright eyes scanning the surroundings. Eli knelt beside him, placing a reassuring hand on his feathers. "We'll get through this, boy. I promise." The decoy worked temporarily. The following morning, drones buzzed over the abandoned barn, and black SUVs swarmed the area. From their vantage point, Caldwell and Vanessa watched the scene unfold through binoculars. "They took the bait," Caldwell said, a hint of relief in his voice. "But it won't take them long to realize he's not there." Vanessa frowned. "We need to use this window of time to gather more evidence. If we can expose their operations, they won't be able to touch Talon without facing public backlash," Eli agreed. "Then let's get to work." As they prepared for the next phase of their plan, Eli took a moment to reflect on his bond with Talon. The creature had become more than a responsibility, he was a symbol of resilience and hope. Watching Talon playfully chase after a butterfly in the clearing, Eli felt a surge of determination. "We're not just fighting for him," he said aloud. "We're fighting for everything he represents." Vanessa, standing nearby, smiled. "Then let's make sure the world sees that." The days following the decoy operation were tense but productive. Eli, Vanessa, and Caldwell worked tirelessly to build their case against Genora Labs. The community's involvement gave them newfound strength, but the challenges ahead loomed large. They needed proof, irrefutable evidence of Genora's unethical practices and their attempts to claim Talon. While Vanessa was sorting through old documents in the farmhouse attic, she stumbled upon something extraordinary: a leather-bound journal belonging to Ella's grandfather. Inside were detailed notes and sketches of a similar egg found decades earlier on the very same farm. The entries described a creature that bore a striking resemblance to Talon. "Eli," Vanessa called, rushing downstairs with the journal. "You need to see this." Eli took the journal, his eyes scanning the faded handwriting. He knew about this, but why didn't he tell anyone? Vanessa pointed to a specific passage. "The creature was hidden to protect it from those who sought to exploit its rarity," she read aloud. "Its abilities are a gift, but they must never fall into the wrong hands." The discovery added a layer of mystery to their fight. Talon wasn't just an anomaly. He was part of a legacy, a secret Ellis family had been safeguarding for generations. Meanwhile, Caldwell continued to rally support from the community. He organized a meeting at the local town hall, where Eli and Vanessa shared their story. Carefully omitting sensitive details about Talon, they explained how Genora's actions threatened the farm and the broader ecosystem. "What they're doing isn't just wrong, it's dangerous," Eli said, his voice steady but impassioned. "They're tampering with forces they don't fully understand, and the consequences could affect us all." The room buzzed with murmurs of agreement. One older farmer stood up, his face lined with years of hard work. "We've seen enough of these big companies trying to take what isn't theirs. If you need us, we're here." Their words bolstered Ellis' resolve. The community wasn't just sympathetic, they were ready to take action. Back at the farm, Talon's behavior grew increasingly fascinating. His intelligence and intuition were undeniable. He seemed to understand their emotions, offering comfort with a gentle nudge or a melodic trill. More remarkably, he began displaying abilities that defied explanation. One evening, as a storm rolled in, Talon darted into the fields. Eli followed, calling out for him, only to witness something astonishing. Talon stood in the center of the field, his wings outstretched as lightning crackled in the sky. The air around him seemed to hum with energy, and when the storm subsided, the crops nearby appeared healthier, almost revitalized. Vanessa, who had joined Eli, watched in awe. "He's not just rare, Eli. He's extraordinary." Eli nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "We have to protect him, no matter what." Determined to strike first, Caldwell and Vanessa devised a plan to gather hard evidence against Genora Labs. Using the tracker they had dismantled, Caldwell reverse-engineered its signal to trace its origin. The coordinates led them to a sprawling facility hidden deep in the woods. "Looks like this is where the magic, or the mayhem, happens," Caldwell said, showing Vanessa the map. The two decided to stake out the facility. Armed with cameras and recording equipment, they spent nights observing the lab's activities. What they captured was chilling: cages filled with animals, some mutated beyond recognition, and trucks carrying unmarked containers leaving the premises under the cover of darkness. While the team worked to expose Genora, the corporation was ramping up its efforts. Kane, the cold and calculating agent Eli had encountered, was now leading a full-scale operation to retrieve Talon. Drones began flying over the farm more frequently, and unmarked vehicles were spotted circling the property. The tension was palpable. Vanessa installed motion-activated cameras around the farm, while Caldwell rigged a basic alarm system. Talon, sensing the unease, became increasingly vigilant, often positioning himself near the farmhouse's front porch at night. The constant pressure began taking its toll on the group. Eli, usually calm and collected, found himself snapping at minor inconveniences. Vanessa, ever the voice of reason, tried to soothe him, but even she struggled to keep her composure. "We can't let them win, Eli," she said one evening, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Talon needs us to stay strong." Eli sighed, running a hand through his hair. I just don't know how much longer we can hold them off. Vanessa's eyes softened. We're not alone. The community believes in us. And Talon, he believes in us too. In the midst of their challenges, Talon provided moments of pure joy. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, Eli watched as Talon and a group of children from the community played in the field. The children laughed as Talon flapped his wings, creating a gentle breeze that sent leaves swirling around them. The sight filled Eli with a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about protecting a creature. It was about preserving hope, wonder, and the bond between humans and nature. We're going to fight, he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. And we're going to win. The tension between the Millers and Genora Labs finally came to a head one moonlit night. Despite their preparations, Eli, Vanessa, and Caldwell couldn't anticipate how far the corporation would go to seize Talon. As the farm lay quiet under the stars, the hum of engines broke the silence. A convoy of unmarked trucks approached the property, their headlights cutting through the darkness. Eli and Vanessa, alerted by the motion detectors, bolted out of bed. Caldwell, who had been monitoring the cameras, burst into the living room. They're here, he hissed, grabbing a flashlight and a radio. Vanessa's heart pounded. We need to keep Talon safe. Eli nodded. I'll distract them. Caldwell, get Talon to the barn. Vanessa, stay with him. The three split up, each moving with a sense of urgency born of desperation. Talon, sensing the danger, followed Caldwell into the shadows of the barn. His feathers shimmered faintly under the moonlight, making him a target even in the dark. Eli stood on the porch, shotgun in hand. He didn't plan to use it, he only wanted to buy time. The convoy halted, and Kane emerged from the lead vehicle, flanked by a group of agents dressed in black. Mr. Miller, Kane called out, his voice calm yet menacing. Let's not make this difficult. Hand over the creature, and no one gets hurt. Eli clenched his jaw. You have no right to be here. Kane smirked. We're protecting humanity, Mr. Miller. You're harboring a biological anomaly. It's not safe for you or anyone else. That's not your call, Eli retorted, standing his ground. Kane motioned for his agents to move in. Your stubbornness is admirable, but futile. In the barn, Vanessa and Caldwell worked frantically to conceal Talon. The bird stood motionless, his piercing eyes watching their every move. Vanessa whispered soothing words, her hand resting on his beak. It's okay, Talon. We'll protect you. Caldwell, crouching near a hidden trapdoor in the barn floor, motioned for Vanessa to help him. We can hide him down here. It's not much, but it'll keep him out of sight. As they maneuvered Talon into the small space, the barn door creaked open. Flashlights danced across the hay-strewn floor. Search everywhere, a voice barked. Vanessa's breath hitched. She exchanged a look with Caldwell, who held a finger to his lips. The two crouched in the shadows, their hearts racing as footsteps approached. As one of the agents neared the trapdoor, Talon let out a low, guttural trill. The sound froze the intruder in his tracks. Before anyone could react, Talon emerged from the shadows, his wings spreading wide in a display of power. The agent stumbled backward, tripping over a hay bale. The commotion drew more agents into the barn, but Talon was ready. With a powerful flap of his wings, he kicked up a whirlwind of dust and straw, disorienting his pursuers. Vanessa took the opportunity to grab Caldwell's arm. We need to move him now. The two guided Talon through a hidden side entrance, leading him toward the dense woods behind the farm. Back at the house, Eli was running out of options. The agents were closing in, and Kane watched the scene unfold with an infuriating calm. You can't protect it forever, Kane said, stepping closer. This isn't just about you. It's about the greater good. Eli glared at him. You don't care about the greater good. You care about control. As Kane raised a hand to signal his men, a sudden gust of wind swept through the yard. Leaves swirled in the air, and an eerie silence followed. Eli turned to see Talon emerging from the shadows of the woods, his wings glowing faintly in the moonlight. Talon let out a piercing cry, his presence commanding the attention of everyone on the property. The agents hesitated, their movements faltering as the bird stood tall, an imposing figure against the night sky. Kane's confident demeanor cracked. "What is this?" Talon took a step forward, his gaze locked on Kane. The agents raised their weapons, but Talon didn't flinch. Instead, he flapped his wings, creating a gust so strong it knocked several of them off their feet. Eli seized the moment. "You see that? He's not a threat unless you make him one." Kane's face twisted with frustration. "This isn't over, Miller." With a reluctant wave, he signaled his men to retreat. The convoy backed away, the sound of their engines fading into the distance. Talon stood his ground until the last vehicle disappeared. As the dust settled, Vanessa and Caldwell emerged from the woods with Talon. Eli ran to them, his relief palpable. "They're gone. For now," he said, pulling Vanessa into a hug. Caldwell nodded, his expression grim. "But they'll be back. We need a plan." Eli looked at Talon, who seemed unbothered by the chaos. "Well, protect him," he said firmly. "No matter what it takes." The group returned to the farmhouse, exhausted but determined. The battle wasn't over, but they had won this round. Talon had proven that he wasn't just a creature to be studied or controlled, he was part of their family, and they would fight for him with everything they had. The night after the raid felt heavier than ever. Eli, Vanessa, and Caldwell sat in the living room, their faces illuminated by the dim glow of a single lamp. Talon rested outside the farmhouse, his enormous frame blending with the shadows of the barn. Despite their temporary victory, the Millers knew that Genora Labs wouldn't give up easily. "We can't keep waiting for them to attack again," Vanessa said, her voice resolute. "We need to go on the offensive." Eli nodded. "But how? They've got resources, connections, we're just a family trying to protect a bird." Caldwell leaned forward, placing a laptop on the coffee table. "Not just any bird," he said, pulling up satellite images of the area. "If Talon's abilities are as unique as we've seen, we need to use them to our advantage. He's not just a creature, he's a symbol of resilience." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "What are you suggesting?" Caldwell clicked to open another file, showing a map of Genora Labs' headquarters. "We expose them. If the public knows what they're doing, experimenting on animals, violating ethical boundaries, they'll lose their power." "But how do we do that?" Eli asked. "They've covered their tracks so well." Caldwell smirked. "That's where Talon comes in." Caldwell explained his daring plan. They would capture footage of Talon displaying his extraordinary abilities and link it to documents Caldwell had unearthed about Genora Labs' illegal activities. The evidence would be enough to spark public outrage and force authorities to investigate. Vanessa hesitated. Putting Talon in the spotlight could make him a bigger target. "It's a risk," Caldwell admitted. "But it's the only way to keep him safe in the long run." Eli took Vanessa's hand. "We've come this far. If this is the only way to stop them, we have to try." Vanessa looked at Talon through the window. His majestic form stood tall against the moonlight, as if he understood their conversation. Finally, she nodded. "Let's do it." The next morning, the team set up cameras in the field behind the farmhouse. Eli worked with Talon, coaxing him to perform some of the remarkable feats they had witnessed over the weeks. Talon, as if sensing the importance of the moment, spread his wings wide, creating gusts of wind that rustled the nearby trees. Vanessa recorded every moment, capturing Talon's agility, intelligence, and sheer power. At one point, he picked up a boulder with his talons, lifting it effortlessly before setting it down with precision. As the session continued, Talon performed a display that left them all in awe. His feathers, catching the sunlight, shimmered in iridescent hues of green and gold, creating a dazzling spectacle. The footage was more than enough to prove his uniqueness. With the recording secured, Caldwell worked late into the night editing the footage and pairing it with incriminating documents about Genora Labs. Meanwhile, Vanessa and Eli took turns keeping watch, knowing that the lab's agents could return at any moment. Caldwell finally uploaded the finished product to a secure server and prepared it for release. "Once this goes live, there's no turning back," he warned. Eli placed a hand on Caldwell's shoulder. "Do it." Caldwell hit the button, and the video was sent to news outlets, social media platforms, and animal rights organizations around the world. Within hours, the video began gaining traction, with hashtags like #SaveTalon and #ExposeGenora trending online. The public's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. News stations picked up the story, airing clips of Talon's breathtaking abilities alongside damning evidence against Genora Labs. Protests erupted outside the lab's headquarters, and calls for investigations flooded local government offices. However, the Millers' relief was short-lived. That evening, as they watched the news coverage, the unmistakable sound of helicopters filled the air. Lights from drones scanned the fields around the farmhouse. "They're here," Vanessa whispered, her voice trembling. Eli grabbed his shotgun, though he doubted it would be enough. "Get Talon out of here." Caldwell pointed toward the woods. "There's a cave system nearby. It'll be safer for him there." Vanessa and Caldwell hurried to Talon, who seemed uneasy but compliant. As they led him toward the woods, Eli stayed behind to confront the approaching agents. Kane emerged from one of the helicopters, flanked by heavily armed agents. "Did you think you could outsmart us, Miller?" he called out. Eli stood firm. "The world knows what you've done. It's over." Kane smirked. "The world might know, but you've made a mistake. You've made Talon too valuable. Well, find him, no matter where you hide him." Eli aimed his shotgun at the ground, his finger hovering over the trigger. "Not if I stop you first." Before Kane could respond, a deafening cry echoed through the air. Talon had returned, his massive wings cutting through the night sky. He swooped low, scattering the agents and forcing Kane to retreat to the safety of his helicopter. Talon landed beside Eli, his powerful presence forcing the remaining agents to hesitate. For a moment, man and bird stood side by side, an unbreakable team against the odds. The agents, outmatched and disorganized, began retreating. Kane's voice crackled over the helicopter's loudspeaker. "This isn't over, Miller. You'll regret this." As the helicopters disappeared into the night, Eli turned to Talon, placing a hand on his beak. "You saved us, buddy." Vanessa and Caldwell emerged from the woods, their expressions a mix of relief and disbelief. "What now?" Vanessa asked. Eli looked at Talon, who stood proud and unwavering. "We keep fighting. Together." The air around the farm was charged with tension, even as the last of Genora Labs' helicopters disappeared into the horizon. Talon stood tall, his massive wings slightly spread as if ready to take flight at any moment. Eli, Vanessa, and Caldwell gathered in the barn, the dim light casting long shadows that danced across the wooden walls. Their victory felt fleeting, and they knew that Kane's threat was not idle. "We can't stay here anymore," Vanessa said, her voice firm but tinged with sadness. "They'll come back, and next time, they won't hesitate to destroy everything." Eli nodded. "You're right. But where can we go? Talon isn't exactly easy to hide." Caldwell leaned against the barn door, his mind racing. "We need a place where they can't reach us, somewhere remote and protected. There's a wildlife reserve upstate that could be perfect. It's owned by an old colleague of mine, a conservationist who would understand Talon's importance." Vanessa glanced at Talon, her heart heavy. "It's his best chance. But how do we get him there without drawing attention?" Caldwell smiled faintly. "Leave that to me." Over the next few days, Caldwell worked tirelessly to arrange their escape. Using his connections, he secured a reinforced trailer designed to transport large animals. Meanwhile, Vanessa and Eli prepared the farm for their departure, leaving no trace of Talon's presence behind. On the night of their planned departure, the family gathered around Talon one last time in the barn. Vanessa knelt beside him, stroking his feathers. "You've been more than a miracle to us," she whispered. "You've been family." Eli placed a hand on her shoulder. "Well, make sure he's safe, no matter what." Talon let out a soft cry, nuzzling against Vanessa as if understanding her words. The bond they had formed was unshakable, and the thought of leaving the farm behind filled them all with a bittersweet ache. As dawn broke, Caldwell drove the trailer onto the main road, with Eli and Vanessa following closely behind in their truck. The journey to the wildlife reserve was fraught with tension, every passing vehicle and overhead helicopter a potential threat. At one point, a black SUV appeared in their rearview mirror, matching their speed. Ellis' heart raced as he gripped the steering wheel. "It's them," he muttered. Vanessa reached for her phone, ready to call Caldwell. "What do we do?" Before they could act, Talon let out a loud cry from the trailer. The sound startled the SUV's driver, causing the vehicle to swerve off the road and into a ditch. The Millers exchanged a glance, their resolve strengthened. Talon wasn't just a passenger, he was their protector. After hours of driving through winding roads and dense forests, they finally arrived at the wildlife reserve. Caldwell's colleague, Dr. Eleanor Bryce, greeted them at the gate. A seasoned conservationist with years of experience, Eleanor's eyes widened in awe as she laid eyes on Talon. "He's magnificent," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never seen anything like him." Eleanor led them to a secluded section of the reserve, a vast area with dense foliage, open fields, and a freshwater stream. "This will be his sanctuary," she explained. "He'll be safe here, away from prying eyes." As they released Talon from the trailer, he spread his wings and let out a triumphant cry, the sound echoing across the reserve. He took a tentative step forward, then another, before launching into the air. The sight of him soaring above the trees brought tears to Vanessa's eyes. Over the following days, the Millers and Caldwell worked with Eleanor to ensure Talon's transition to the reserve was smooth. They monitored his behavior, provided him with food, and gradually allowed him to acclimate to his new environment. One evening, as they watched Talon perch on a rocky outcrop, Eleanor turned to Eli. "You've done something incredible here. Not just for Talon, but for conservation efforts everywhere. His story will inspire countless others." Eli nodded, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. "It wasn't easy, but it was worth it." Vanessa added, "He's more than just a rare creature. He's a symbol of resilience, of what it means to fight for what matters." Despite the peace they found at the reserve, the Millers knew that Genora Labs wouldn't give up easily. Caldwell spent his nights working on a plan to expose the organization further, gathering more evidence and rallying support from conservation groups and journalists. Eli and Vanessa, meanwhile, focused on rebuilding their lives. They stayed close to the reserve, visiting Talon often and ensuring he remained safe. Each visit reminded them of the journey they had undertaken and the strength they had discovered within themselves. As the weeks turned into months, Talon thrived in his new home. His majestic presence attracted the attention of other wildlife, and soon, he was the center of a thriving ecosystem. Eleanor documented his progress, her research providing invaluable insights into the care and protection of endangered species. For the Millers, Talon's journey was a testament to the power of hope and determination. They had faced insurmountable odds, but together, they had created a new future for a creature that had changed their lives forever. The Millers stood at the edge of the wildlife reserve, the setting sun casting a golden glow over the forest. Talon's silhouette soared across the horizon, his wings slicing through the air with effortless grace. It was a sight they had grown accustomed to yet never ceased to marvel at, a living testament to their perseverance and love. Eli watched Talon with a mixture of pride and wonder. "He's more than just a creature," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "He's a reminder of what it means to hold on, even when the odds are stacked against you." Vanessa nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. "Talon taught us to fight for what we believe in, no matter how impossible it seems. He's as much a part of our family as we are of his story." Nearby, Dr. Eleanor Bryce observed the family with a knowing smile. "You've done something extraordinary," she said. Talon's story is already making waves in conservation circles. He's a symbol of hope, for species thought lost, for ecosystems on the brink of collapse, and for people who need to believe in miracles. News of Talon's safe relocation and the Millers' battle against Genora Labs had begun to spread. Caldwell's tireless efforts to expose the organization had borne fruit. Conservation groups, journalists, and activists rallied around the story, amplifying the message that every creature, no matter how rare, deserved a chance to thrive. The farm, once a struggling enterprise, became a focal point for change. Visitors flocked to hear the Millers' story, inspired by their courage and determination. Some brought donations, while others volunteered to help rebuild the farm into a sanctuary for displaced and endangered animals. Eli and Vanessa worked with the local community to create educational programs, teaching children and adults alike about the importance of biodiversity and environmental stewardship. Talon's story became a cornerstone of their mission, a vivid reminder of the interconnectedness of all life. At the reserve, Talon had not only adapted but thrived. Eleanor's research showed that he was contributing to the local ecosystem in ways no one had anticipated. His presence attracted other animals, creating a ripple effect that revitalized the area. Birds nested in the trees Talon favored, and small mammals found shelter near his chosen perches. On one memorable day, Eleanor discovered that Talon had begun constructing a nest high in the cliffs that bordered the reserve. It was a sign that he had fully embraced his new environment, and it filled the Millers with a profound sense of accomplishment. "He's found his place," Vanessa whispered as they watched him carefully weave branches into his nest. "He's finally home." Months later, Eli and Vanessa welcomed a new addition to their family, a baby girl they named Hope. The name was a tribute to the journey they had undertaken and the lessons they had learned along the way. Oliver, now a bright and curious toddler, was thrilled to be a big brother. His laughter echoed through the reserve as he played with his parents, his world filled with love and wonder. Talon remained a constant presence in their lives. Though he now lived in the wild, he seemed to sense when the Millers visited the reserve, often soaring down to greet them with a resonant cry. His bond with the family, forged in the most unlikely of circumstances, remained unbroken. One evening, as the family sat around a campfire at the reserve, Eli turned to Vanessa. "Do you ever think about how it all started? That giant egg in the field? It feels like a lifetime ago." Vanessa smiled, her eyes glinting in the firelight. "It was the beginning of something we could never have imagined. Talon changed our lives in ways we're still discovering. He brought us closer as a family, gave us a purpose, and reminded us of the power of hope." Eleanor, sitting nearby with a notebook in hand, chimed in. "And he's done more than that. Talon's story is inspiring conservation efforts worldwide. People are waking up to the importance of protecting our planet and its creatures." Caldwell raised a mug of coffee in a toast. "To Talon, to resilience, and to the Millers, may their story continue to inspire for generations." As the flames flickered and the stars emerged in the night sky, the Millers reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. They knew the challenges weren't over, there would always be battles to fight and causes to champion. But they also knew they were stronger now, united by their shared experiences and the love that had carried them through. Talon's cry echoed through the night, a sound that was both wild and familiar. It was a reminder of the incredible journey they had undertaken and the extraordinary bond they had formed. As they gazed at the sky, they felt a deep sense of gratitude, for the challenges that had shaped them, for the miracles that had sustained them, and for the hope that continued to guide their way. The Millers had found more than just a creature in that field. They had found a purpose, a legacy, and a future filled with endless possibilities. Thank you for watching the video all the way through. If you liked the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this.